Las Vegas Raiders fans, you need to hear this. We have some really exciting news coming straight from the Las Vegas Raiders camp. Quarterback Aidan O'Connell has been putting in extra work this offseason, and not just any work. He's been training with none other than Tom Brady. We'll dive into that in just a second. Plus, we have major updates on Max Crosby's contract, including some eye-opening details about his cap hits. If you're a Raiders fan, you know that cap hits are what really matter, not just the big contract numbers. But before we jump into today's news, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. If you love football news, rumors, and insider insights, you're in the right place. Smash that like button and let's get into it. So, here's the big story. Mike Dixon from Vegas Sports Today recently reported that Aidan O'Connell has been making serious improvements. He's added muscle to improve his durability and is spending extra hours breaking down game film. But the biggest surprise? He's been studying tape with Raiders minority owner and NFL legend Tom Brady at the team facility. Now, we don't know if this was a one-time thing or if they've been doing this regularly. But what we do know is that this could be a game-changer for O'Connell. Many scouts compare him to Tom Brady, not because of his speed or mobility. He's definitely not Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson, but because of his ability to manage the pocket and make precise throws. The real challenge for O'Connell has been reading defenses quickly, recognizing coverage shifts, and making smart decisions after the snap. If there's anyone who can help him improve in that area, it's Tom Brady. Think about it. Brady spent 20-plus years picking apart defenses and making the right reads. If O'Connell can absorb even a fraction of that knowledge, it could make a huge difference in his development. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. The Raiders still have their eyes on other quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold. So, O'Connell isn't guaranteed to be the starter just yet. But the fact that he's putting in this level of work shows that he's serious about competing for that job. One thing is clear. Aidan O'Connell is making the most of his opportunity. Not every young quarterback gets to study with an NFL legend like Tom Brady, but O'Connell has that connection, and he's taking full advantage of it. That alone deserves some respect. But here's something even more important. He's been working on his body too. O'Connell has added muscle this offseason to improve his durability and overall performance. And if we're being honest, durability is a huge deal for any quarterback. Last season, O'Connell had multiple chances to prove himself. 3, to be exact. He had an opportunity in the preseason, but he didn't win the starting job. Then, after the Raiders' struggles at quarterback, he got another shot. It was his moment to step up, take control, and prove he was the future of the franchise. At times, he looked solid. He showed glimpses of real potential. But the biggest issue? He kept getting hurt. Football is a tough game. Every quarterback takes hits. But if you want to be the long-term leader of a team, you have to show that you can stay on the field. O'Connell got injured twice after getting his opportunities. That's a problem. The Raiders had to turn back to other quarterbacks, and by the time they considered O'Connell again, it was already too late. Now, let's be real. Teams don't give quarterbacks 4 or 5 chances to prove themselves. Most get 1 shot, maybe 2 at most. If you can't stay healthy and perform when it counts, teams will move on quickly. And that's exactly why the Raiders are looking at other quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford. They're in win-now mode. Think about it. Pete Carroll is here for at least 3 years, possibly 4. The man is in his 70s. Do you really think he's looking to spend years developing a young quarterback? Not likely. The Raiders might go all in over the next few seasons to chase a Super Bowl. And then there's Max Crosby's contract, which is another big piece of this puzzle. His deal is structured in a way that suggests the Raiders are setting up for a big move, maybe a veteran quarterback who can help them compete right away. Max Crosby's contract, a genius move by the Raiders? All right, let's break this down because the Raiders just made a very smart move with Max Crosby's contract. Crosby's extension makes him one of the highest-paid non-quarterbacks in the league, $35.5 million per year over 3 years. But here's where things get really interesting. The way the Raiders structured this deal is pure strategy. Instead of spreading out the money evenly, they front-loaded it. That means they increased his salary cap hit in 2025 and 2026 by an extra $11 million total. Before the extension, Crosby's 2025 cap hit was set at $27 million, and his 2026 cap hit was $24 million. The Raiders bumped each of those up by $1 million and packed more guaranteed money into those 2 seasons. Now, why does that matter? Because from 2027 to 2029, Crosby's contract becomes super team friendly. His cap hit drops to around $28 million per year, which will be way below what other elite pass rushers like Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons will be making. Think about it. The Raiders are paying up front now so that later they have more flexibility, and that could mean going all in on a quarterback. We already know they tried to sign Matthew Stafford to a 2-year deal, and they've been linked to guys like Sam Darnold. If they land a quarterback on a short-term contract, by the time 2027 rolls around, Crosby's lower cap hit would give them room to absorb any dead cap from that QB's deal. It's a long-term chess move by Pete Carroll and Grandmaster John Spytek. But here's the catch. Contracts in the NFL aren't always what they seem. Nothing is ever guaranteed. Remember when we thought Khalil Mack would be a Raider for life? Gone. What about Amari Cooper? Same story. And here's something crucial. From 2027 to 2029, Crosby has 0 guaranteed money left in his deal. That means if the Raiders ever wanted to move on, they could trade him without taking a big financial hit. Of course, no one wants to see Crosby in another uniform, but in the business of football, anything can happen. Max Crosby's future. Will he stay or demand a trade? This is where things get really interesting, and maybe a little concerning for Raiders fans. We've already heard rumblings that if the Raiders don't start winning, Max Crosby might request a trade. And honestly, can you blame him? Crosby isn't getting younger. He's already 28 years old, and by the time he's 30, if the Raiders are still stuck in mediocrity, he might want out. This guy wants to compete for championships, and if the team isn't on that path, he could easily push for a move. Now, here's the good news for the Raiders. Everything they're doing right now, the Matthew Stafford rumors, Crosby's contract extension, Pete Carroll coming in, points to one thing. They're going all in. They want to win right now. Does that mean a Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years? Maybe. Maybe not. But it does mean they're going to push hard to get there. At the very least, expect them to be playoff contenders. But if they fail, Crosby's contract would make him a hot trade target, and teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, who are always looking for that final piece, could come knocking. His $27 to $28 million cap hit would be a steal compared to what other elite pass rushers will be making by then. A first-round pick in return? Maybe even more. Of course, there's another scenario. Crosby could just sign another extension and stay in Vegas. But that depends on whether the Raiders prove they're serious about winning. The Raiders' best shot. Build a dominant defense. If the Raiders truly want to compete for a championship, they don't just need a quarterback. They need to rebuild that defensive line. And guess what? Some big-name defensive linemen might be on the move. NFL insider Adam Schefter recently dropped a bombshell. The Cincinnati Bengals have given all-pro pass rusher Trey Hendrickson permission to seek a trade. That's huge. Should the Raiders go after him? Maybe, but they'll have to decide how much they're willing to spend. Bringing in a top-tier defensive lineman could cost them $30 million per year. But would it be worth it? One thing is clear. The Raiders have to make moves if they want to convince Crosby to stay. Because if they don't, we could be seeing him in another uniform sooner than we think. This could be a game-changer for the Raiders. The Cincinnati Bengals have officially given Trey Hendrickson permission to seek a trade. And let's be real, that doesn't happen often with a top-tier pass rusher. Why are the Bengals doing this? Simple. Money. They've already committed huge contracts to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and key defensive players. With the salary cap tightening, someone had to go, and it looks like it's Hendrickson. Now, let's talk about the Raiders. Imagine Max Crosby on one side and Trey Hendrickson on the other. That's nightmare fuel for quarterbacks, the kind of 1-2 punch that can take over games and change the entire identity of a defense. Here's the kicker. Not everyone agrees that Max Crosby is a top 5 pass rusher. Some argue that Hendrickson is right up there with him. So why not pair them together? What would it take to land Hendrickson? Recent trades for elite pass rushers tell us that Hendrickson won't cost as much as you might think. Montez Sweat went for a second-round pick, but he's younger. Chase Young was traded for a third-round compensatory pick. Zadarius Smith? The Browns got him for a fifth-round pick. So, realistically, Hendrickson could be had for a third-rounder, maybe even less. That's a steal for a guy who's been one of the most productive edge rushers in the league. How can the Raiders afford him? This is where smart cap management comes into play. Crosby's contract is already structured to keep future cap hits low. The Raiders could backload Hendrickson's deal, keeping his cap hit low in the first couple of years. They could even add void years to stretch the money out. Bottom line, it's possible. Other defensive options on the market. Hendrickson isn't the only big name available. The Chargers just released Joey Bosa, another elite pass rusher. Now, Bosa comes with injury concerns, and he's not the same player he was a few years ago, but if the Raiders want to add firepower to their defensive line, options are out there. Final thoughts. Should the Raiders pull the trigger? The answer is simple. Yes, if they're serious about winning now. With Pete Carroll at the helm and Max Crosby in his prime, the Raiders can't afford to waste time. If they make the right moves, this defense could go from good to elite, and fast. The Raiders' next big move. Should they go all in? The NFL offseason is all about big decisions, and the Raiders are at a crossroads. One name floating around? Joey Bosa. He's been plagued by injuries, but at just 28 years old, does he still have something left in the tank? Some believe he's heading to San Francisco to play alongside his brother. But if you're the Raiders, do you at least make the call? Absolutely. Bosa might take a short-term, prove-it deal, maybe $20 million a year for 2 seasons, which could be worth considering. But the question is he the right move? A better option for the Raiders? There's another name that shouldn't be ignored, Javon Hargrave. A dominant defensive tackle with the Eagles, he signed with the 49ers but never quite lived up to expectations. Now, after just 2 seasons, he's back on the market. If the Raiders can land Hargrave for the same price they'd pay for a mid-tier defensive lineman, why wouldn't they do it? Imagine this. Hargrave and Adam Butler rotating inside with Max Crosby on the edge. Add a young, hungry pass rusher like Tyree Wilson, and suddenly this defense looks scary. And the best part? Hargrave still has gas in the tank. If the Raiders can sign him on a short-term deal, it could be a game-changing move. Building a defensive wall. A dominant defensive line can carry a team deep into the playoffs. Look at the Eagles a few years ago. They shattered sack records and powered their way to the Super Bowl. The Raiders should aim for the same formula. Load up on talent in the trenches. Make quarterbacks uncomfortable every single snap. Force mistakes. Create chaos. Win games. This strategy works. And if the Raiders are serious about competing now, they need to invest in the defensive line. What about Hunter Renfrow? On a different note, former Raiders wide receiver Hunter Renfrow has taken an unexpected career turn. He's now working in business development for the South Carolina Department of Commerce in the recycling industry. That's right, one of the NFL's best slot receivers has shifted to a completely new field. Some say the era of the small, shifty slot receiver is fading from the NFL. While Renfrow was an elite route runner, his size made it tough for him to dominate in an evolving league. Still, he's only 28 and hasn't ruled out a return. Could we see a Renfrow comeback story in the near future? Never say never. Final thoughts. The Raiders have some massive decisions ahead. Do they chase a big-name defensive lineman? Do they go all in on improving the trenches? And what does the future hold for former stars like Renfrow?